One single phrase was enough to turn a bustling New York restaurant into a graveyard. When Vincent Romano, the capo of the East Coast, slammed his fist on the table and whispered an order in a Sicilian dialect so ancient and sharp it felt like a blade, no one moved. The bodyguards froze. The manager trembled. Then a soft, steady voice, like distant thunder, cut through the terrifying silence. "Answer him in perfect, fluent Italian," it said. It wasn't a lieutenant. It wasn't a rival boss. It was a girl. While pouring the water, the waitress didn't just serve a drink, she signed her own death warrant. Or perhaps her destiny. The clatter of silverware hitting the floor sounded like a gunshot inside La Masca, probably the most pretentious and exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan. Dropping a fork was a sin here, but tonight it felt like a death sentence. Sophie froze, gripping the pitcher of ice water so tightly her knuckles turned white. It wasn't her who dropped the fork, it was the busboy, a nervous teenager who looked ready to faint. But that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the man at table number 4. Vincent Romano. Even if you never watched the news, you knew him. Or rather, you felt him. He didn't look like a movie mobster with loud pinstripe suits and cigars. He was far more terrifying because he looked like a CEO. He wore a custom charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Sophie's entire year of rent. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was strikingly handsome yet carved from granite. The problem was his eyes. They were cold. Dead. And right now they were fixed on the trembling busboy with the focused stare of a wolf watching a wounded rabbit. The restaurant, usually filled with the cacophony of clinking glasses and hushed conversations, plunged into deathly silence. The air grew thick, suffocating. Vincent didn't shout. He didn't flip the table. He simply leaned forward. His voice, a low, hoarse growl barely audible beyond the table, somehow reached every corner of the room. "Idiot. The kid is useless. Throw him out before I tie him up right here." It was Sicilian, not the textbook Italian taught in universities, but the old language of the hills, blood feuds, and rocky soil. The dialect of Western Sicily, thick and impenetrable to an untrained ear. The manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, who insisted on being called Monsieur Henri, rushed forward, wringing his hands. "Mr. Romano, please, is everything all right? Can I help you with anything?" Vincent ignored him. His gaze never left the busboy as his hand slowly slid toward the steak knife lying on the white tablecloth. The threat was palpable. Seconds remained. "Mr. Henderson looked around desperately. He hadn't understood a word. None of the bodyguards moved. They waited for the signal. The tension stretched like a piano wire ready to snap and take someone's head off. Sophie didn't think. Her body moved before her brain could scream at her to stop. She stepped forward and filled the empty glass in front of Vincent with a steady stream of water. "But he's a good boy, Don Vincenzo," she said softly. Her voice was even, her accent flawless, exactly matching the cadences of his own dialect. "I agree with you, Don Vincenzo. He is not useless. He is simply frightened. Fear makes the hand shake, but not the heart." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Vincent Romano froze. His hand stopped inches from the knife. Slowly, painfully, he turned his head. For the first time that evening, the entire room seemed to disappear. The terrified busboy, the sweating manager, the armed guards, all faded into the background. Vincent raised his eyes. His dark gaze locked onto Sophie's. She was nobody, just a waitress in a black uniform one size too big, brown hair pulled into a messy bun. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing to draw attention. And yet she had just spoken to the most dangerous man in New York in the dialect of his grandmother. "What did you say?" Vincent asked, this time in English. His voice was dangerously quiet. Sophie swallowed. Her throat was dry, but she held his gaze. She knew the rule. Show fear to a predator and you become prey. "I said he is simply frightened, sir." Vincent stuttered her. It wasn't a look of admiration, it was calculation. He was dissecting her. "You speak the old tongue. Where are you from?" "Parma di Corleone, sir," Sophie lied. Her face was a perfect mask of professional courtesy. "Water, sir." The corner of Vincent's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, it was a warning. "Leave the bottle," he ordered, never breaking eye contact. "Sit. Mister." Henderson gasped. "Sir, she can't. I said sit." Vincent barked, and the power in his voice cracked like a whip. Sophie set down the pitcher and smoothed her apron. She could feel every diner's eyes on her back. She knew how it looked, like the beginning of a Cinderella story. But Sophie knew better. This wasn't a romance. This was an interrogation. She pulled out the chair opposite him and Saturday. "Who are you?" Vincent asked, leaning back. His fingers drummed a slow, rhythmic beat on the table. "Sophie Miller, sir," she said. "Just Sophie from Hoboken, who speaks a dialect no one has spoken correctly in 20 years. Thoughtfully, Vincent reached into his jacket's inner pocket. The bodyguards tensed. Sophie didn't flinch. He pulled out a silver cigarette case, took out a cigarette, and lit it, ignoring the no smoking signs on the walls. "Do you know who I am, Sophie?" "You're the man who scares a busboy," she replied. Silence fell over the table again. One of the bodyguards, a mountain of a man named Rocco, stepped forward, hand moving toward his holster. "Watch your mouth, girl." Vincent raised a hand, stopping him. He took a drag. Smoke curled around his face. "You have either courage or stupidity. I haven't decided which yet." "I just want to finish my shift," Sophie said. "And I want Brett to finish his without getting hurt." Vincent laughed, a dry, joyless sound. "You think you can save him?" "I think," Sophie said, leaning forward slightly and switching back to the Sicilian dialect, "that a king does not need to kill a servant to prove his strength." Vincent's eyes narrowed. The air between them crackled with electricity. He stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. Then he stood abruptly, reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills, and tossed it on the table. "Dinner is over." He looked at Sophie one last time. "You're right. The king does not kill servants." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "But he does take Queen's prisoner. I'm not leaving the city, Sophie." And with those words he turned and walked out. His entourage swept after him like a dark storm. Sophie sat alone at the table. The scent of his expensive cologne and cigarette smoke lingered in the air. Her hands, which she had kept perfectly still under the table, now trembled uncontrollably. One thing was certain. Her life as a simple waitress had ended. Sophie didn't go straight home. She couldn't. After the incident at La Masca, Mr. Henderson practically shoved her out the back door and ordered her to take the rest of the week off. He was terrified. He saw her as a lightning rod that had just attracted the storm of the century. He was right. She walked quickly through the rainy Manhattan streets, sneakers slapping in puddles. She kept her head down, checking her reflection in shop windows, not to fix her hair, but to make sure no one was following. She wasn't Sophie Miller from Hoboken. That was the lie she told the IRS and her landlord. Her real name was Sophia DeMarco, and she had spent the last 10 years trying to forget the language she had just spoken. Her father had been consigliere to one of the old Chicago families. He was a man of words, not violence, but in that life, words were often deadlier than bullets. When the internal war broke out, her father grabbed her and fled. He taught her to be invisible. Never speak that language, Sophia. It's like a beacon, it calls monsters. Tonight Sophie had lit the beacon. She turned the corner onto 34th Street, heading for the subway. She needed to pack her things. She needed to disappear. If Vincent Romano started digging into Sophie Miller from Hoboken, he would hit a dead end. And men like Vincent Romano hated dead ends. Suddenly a black SUV slowed beside her. Sophie's heart slammed against her ribs. She slipped her hand into her bag, fingers finding the small pepper spray canister attached to her keys. Stupid, she thought. Pepper spray against the Romano crime family. Might as well use a water pistol. She kept walking, faster now. The SUV matched her pace. The window rolled down. "Get in, Sophie," said a voice. It wasn't Vincent. It was the thug from the restaurant, Rocco. "I'd rather walk, thanks," she said without stopping. "It's not a request," Rocco replied. 2 doors opened ahead. 2 men in suits stepped out and blocked the sidewalk. They weren't holding guns, but the way they stood, feet planted wide, hands ready, told her running was useless. Sophie stopped. She took a deep breath, summoning the cold calm her father had drilled into her. "You're not arresting me." "You're inviting me," Rocco said from the car. The boss wants to finish the conversation. It's 2 in the morning. Bosses don't work at midnight. Sophie scanned the empty street. No witnesses. If she screamed, they'd just stuff her inside. If she fought, she'd lose. Cooperation was the only move that bought her time. Fine, she said, lifting her chin. But if I'm not home by 3 to feed my cat, he gets very cranky. Rocco almost smiled. Get in. She slid into the back seat. The leather was soft. The interior smelled of mint, but the door closed with a heavy thud that sounded like a prison cell locking. They drove in silence. Sophie watched the city blur past the window, trying to memorize the route. They weren't heading to a warehouse or the docks. They were going to the Upper East Side. The car stopped in front of a townhouse that looked more like a fortress. Wrought iron gates, red blinking cameras, stone lions guarding the entrance. It was the lion's den. Rocco opened her door. Move. They led her into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. Marble floors, a crystal chandelier like a weeping willow of diamonds and gold. Paintings on the walls that definitely didn't come from IKEA. Library, Rocco grunted to a guard. They walk her down a hallway lined with portraits of stern men. She recognized some from the history lessons her father had given her. The Romanos had been in power since Prohibition. They weren't just a gang, they were a dynasty. The library doors opened. It was a dimly lit room smelling of old paper and whiskey. A fire crackled in the hearth. Vincent stood by the window, staring at the rain-slick street. He had removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms and a cross tattoo on his right wrist. You didn't run, he said without turning. I didn't have much choice, Sophie answered from the doorway. Your gorillas are very convincing. Vincent turned. Firelight cast shadows across his face, sharpening his cheekbones and darkening his eyes. Rocco is crude but effective. He walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Bourbon. Rare Pain Vintage. He held one out. Sophie hesitated. I don't drink on the job. You're not on the job, Sophie. You've been fired. Sophie blinked. What? Mr. Henderson. He called me 10 minutes after I left. Apologized profusely and informed me he had terminated your employment to avoid further incidents. Vincent took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. You're unemployed, so drink. Sophie felt a flash of anger. The job had been awful, but it paid the bills. You got me fired. I saved you the trouble of quitting yourself, Vincent said calmly, because now you work for me. Sophie laughed, short and incredulous. I definitely do not work for you. I don't work for criminals. Vincent set his glass down. The playful glint vanished from his eyes, replaced by that terrifying icy focus. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped inches from her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. Heat and power radiated from him. You are not a waitress, he said quietly. I checked your name. Sophie Miller. Social Security number issued 3 years ago in Ohio. Before that, nothing. You didn't exist. Sophie's heart stopped. You speak the Sicilian dialect spoken only in the western provinces, precisely the families tied to the Cosa Nostra, Vincent continued, stepping closer, forcing her back until she hit the heavy oak table. You carry yourself not like a servant but like someone used to being obeyed. You're not afraid of me, which means you've seen worse things than me. He placed his hands on the table on either side of her, trapping her. So I'll ask you one more time. I suggest you tell the truth before I lose my patience, he whispered, his face inches from hers. Who sent you? Are you a spy for the Moretti family or for the feds? Sophie looked into his eyes. She saw danger there, but also something else. Paranoia. He was a king on a throne of knives, waiting for the blade that would kill him. I'm not a spy, Don, she whispered. I'm not with the feds. Then who are you? I'm a girl who just wants to go home. Wrong answer, Vincent growled. Suddenly the library door burst open. Rocco rushed in, pale as a ghost. Boss, we have a problem. Vincent didn't move away from Sophie. I'm busy. The warehouse in the Bronx, Rocco said urgently. It's burning and they found a message painted on the door. Vincent finally stepped back. The spell broke. What message? It's in old Italian, Rocco said, glancing nervously at Sophie. We can't read it. It's that old slang again. Vincent cursed under his breath. He looked at Rocco, then back at Sophie. A dark, calculating smile spread across his face. "Well," Vincent said, grabbing his jacket, "looks like you start your new job tonight, Sophie." "I'm not going with you," she protested. Vincent seized her wrist. His grip was iron but not painful, just commanding. "Want to prove you're not a spy? Then come and translate it. If you lie to me, I'll kill you. If you tell the truth, well, we'll discuss your severance package." He pulled her toward the door. "Welcome to the family, Tessarosa." The drive to the Bronx was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and tension so thick you could choke on it. Vincent didn't speak the entire way. He spent it on his phone, typing furiously. His face was lit by the cold blue glow of the screen. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a general commanding a losing army. Sophie sat pressed against the door, thinking feverishly. She ran through every possibility. If the warehouse message was ordinary gang graffiti, she could invent a translation. She could say what it meant and hopefully Vincent's death would end there. But if it was specific, if it was that dialect, the car screeched to a halt. "Stay close to me," Vincent ordered, opening the door. The smell hit first. Acrid burning rubber and wet ash. The warehouse was a monstrous skeleton against the night sky. Flames licked the roof despite the pouring rain. Fire trucks were there, but the crew stood back, blocked by a wall of black SUVs and men in suits. Police were nowhere in sight. The Romanos clearly had the precinct in their pocket. Rocco opened an umbrella over Vincent, but the boss pushed it away. He walked straight to the loading dock gates. His expensive shoes crunched over broken glass. Sophie followed, flanked by two guards. There, Rocco pointed. The main metal shutter was twisting from the heat, but the brick wall beside it had survived. On it, in ragged, dripping red letters, was the message. It wasn't just Italian. It wasn't even standard Sicilian. It was a mysterious rhyming slang of the Calabrian and Ndrangheta interwoven with the specific dialect of the western Sicilian hills. It was a hybrid code used by only one clan, the clan her father had fled. Sophie felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees buckled. Blood calls to blood. The little girl has come home. Vincent stared at the inscription. He looked at his men. Well, what does it say? One of the lieutenants, a man named Paul, shifted uncomfortably. Something about blood, boss. Blood calls to blood, but the second part or it's a little picture. Vincent turned to Sophie. His eyes were dark pits in the flickering firelight. Translate, Sophie. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew exactly what it meant. Blood calls to blood. The little girl has come home. Somehow they knew. They knew she was in New York. The restaurant incident had drawn attention, not only Vincent's. It had awakened the ghosts of her past. If she told Vincent the truth, that the message was for her, he would realize she was a target. And men like Vincent Romano didn't keep targets close, they used them as bait. She needed to lie. The lie had to be flawless. It's a threat, Sophie said. Her voice shook slightly. She didn't have to fake the fear. That's what I understood. I figured that, Vincent snapped. Translate it literally. It says, blood calls to blood. Debts come home. Vincent narrowed his eyes. Debts? In the dialect of the Trapani coast that would. It's a colloquial expression for small debts that grow over time like interest. Sophie lied smoothly. Vincent studied the graffiti, then looked back at her. He was searching for ticks, sweat on her brow. Sophie held his gaze, summoning every drop of courage she had left. Trapani, Vincent muttered. I have no business in Trapani. The Moretti family is based in Naples. Maybe you have a new enemy, Sophie suggested quietly, or an old one you forgot. Vincent stepped closer to the wall, examining the still wet paint. You translate fast, Sophie, and you know regional slang from Trapani. That's very specific for a girl from Hoboken. My grandmother was from Trapani, Sophie said. It was the standard legend she had used for years. She raised me. She complained a lot. That's how she spoke. Vincent turned to Rocco. Photograph it. Send it to the archive. Cross-check with all known connections from the Trapani region in the last 20 years. He turned back to Sophie. And you're coming with me. I did what you asked, Sophie pleaded. Rain plastered her hair to her face. I translated the message. Let me go. You translated the words, Vincent said, invading her personal space and shielding her from the wind with his broad body. But you didn't explain the context. Why would a clan from Trapani attack a Romano warehouse? We have a truce. I don't understand politics. I'm a waitress. No. Vincent gently took her chin, tilting her face toward the light. His thumb brushed the line of her jaw. The touch was electric, startling them both. You are a riddle, and I do not leave riddles unsolved, especially when they appear on the same night my warehouse burns. A loud explosion inside the warehouse shattered the moment. Glass rained down from the skylights. Boss, we have to go. Rocco shouted. The fire inspector is threatening to call the National Guard if we don't clear out. Vincent didn't release her hand. To the penthouse. No one is going home tonight. But my cat Sophie began. Rocco will feed your damn cat, Vincent growled. He dragged her back to the SUV. Get in the car, Sophie, before I decide to leave you here for the fire inspector to question. As the car pulled away, Sophie looked back at the burning building. The red letters seemed to glow in the darkness. The little girl has come home. She was not safe. Not from the fire. Not from the people who had started it. And definitely not from the man sitting beside her who was watching her with a mixture of suspicion and hunger she was afraid to name. The Romano fortress was not just a penthouse. It was the top 3 floors of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. It was a fortress of glass and steel floating above the city like a distant god. The elevator ride was silent. Sophie stood in the corner, hugging herself. She was cold, soaked, and exhausted. Her uniform smelled of smoke. When the doors opened, she expected a dungeon. Instead, she stepped into a space larger than most hotel lobbies. White marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and modern art that looked like splashes of violence on flawless walls. Lock down the perimeter, Vincent ordered, tossing his wet jacket onto a leather sofa that cost more than Sophie's life. No one enters or leaves without my personal permission. Including my brother. Yes, boss, Rocco nodded. He pointed at Sophie. And her. She stays in the guest wing. Put a guard on the door. Am I a prisoner? Sophie asked. Her voice echoed in the huge space. Vincent walked to the bar and poured a glass of water. He turned and held it out. You're a guest who is not allowed to leave. There's a difference. Not from the law's point of view, Sophie snapped, taking the water because she was dying of thirst. The law doesn't reach this high, Vincent said calmly. He unbuttoned his cuffs and rolled his sleeves again. He looked tired. The fade of the invincible dawn was cracking, revealing the man carrying the weight of an empire. You need dry clothes. There's a robe in the bathroom. Take a shower, then come out. We need to eat. I'm not hungry. I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said we need to eat. Sophie glared at him but turned and walked down the hallway he indicated. The guest room was luxurious. A huge bed, a bathroom with a deep tub, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. She locked the bathroom door, turned on the shower to mask the sound, then immediately pulled out the burner phone, the tiny device she kept hidden in her sock. She dialed the number she hadn't called in 4 years. 1 ring. 2. Speak, a distorted voice answered. It's me, Sophie whispered, eyes filling with tears. They found me. The Vanzetti clan. They burned Romano's warehouse and left a message for me. Long silence on the other end. Romano saw it. Yes, but he doesn't know it was for me. I lied. I told him it was about Romano's debts. Romano is smart, Sophie. He'll figure it out. You have to get out of there. I can't. He's holding me in his penthouse. He thinks I'm a spy or something. He won't let me go. Listen to me. If the Vanzettis are in New York, you're not safe anywhere except next to Romano. The Vanzettis will skin you alive. Romano will only interrogate you. Stay close to him. Be useful. I'll try to arrange an extraction, but it will take time. How long? Days. Maybe a week. You'll survive, Sophie. Be the ghost I taught you to be. The line went dead. Sophie slid to the floor, face in her hands. She was trapped between a monster and the devil. Vincent Romano was dangerous, but the Vanzetti family, they were sadists and butchers who had killed her mother. She stood. She stripped off her wet clothes and stepped under the hot shower, washing the smoke from her skin. She had to play her role. She had to be useful to Vincent without revealing who she was. When she emerged 20 minutes later wrapped in a soft white robe, she found Vincent in the kitchen. He was cooking. The scene was so domestic she froze. The terrifying mafia don stood at the stove, stirring pasta sauce. He had changed into grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt. He looked like an ordinary man. "Carbonara," he said without turning. The real carbonara. No cream. Just guanciale, eggs, and pecorino romano. Sophie approached the kitchen island. "You cook." "My mother insisted. She said one of her sons had to be able to feed himself." He plated 2 dishes and slid one toward her. "Eat." Sophie Saturday. The aroma was intoxicating. She took a bite. It was incredible. "It's delicious," she admitted. "I know." Vincent leaned against the counter, watching her eat. He didn't eat. He drank wine. His eyes traced the line of her neck. "You lied to me earlier, Sophie." Sophie choked on the pasta. She coughed, reaching for water. "About the warehouse," Vincent said quietly. "You translated the words, but you hid something. I saw it in your eyes. You recognized that slang. It wasn't just your grandmother's dialect. It was personal." Sophie set down her fork. "You're imagining things." Vincent walked around the island. He stopped behind her chair. She could feel the heat of his body. He leaned down and his voice became a low rumble at her ear. "I had my analyst study the photo of the graffiti. The phrase pica rida in the criminal world of the 90s was the nickname of the daughter of Marco DeMarco, the consigliere who stole $10 million from 7 families and disappeared." Sophie stopped breathing. "Marco DeMarco had a daughter," Vincent continued, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Her name was Sophia. She would be about your age." He ran his hand through her hair, tucking a stray strand behind her ear. "Tell me, Sophie, is your father enjoying his retirement?" Sophie spun around in the chair, knocking his hand away. She jumped up, backing until she hit the refrigerator. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Vincent stepped closer. "The Vanzetti family is hunting you. That message was a beacon. They're coming for you. If they find you here, they'll bring the war to my doorstep." "Then let me go," Sophie cried. "Let me go. I'll take the war with me." "No," Vincent said. He slammed his palm against the refrigerator beside her head, caging her with his arms. His face was full of rage, and something else. Desperation. "If you leave, I'll catch you in an hour and they'll torture you to find your father, and then they'll come to my territory anyway because they'll think I'm hiding you. So what do you want from me?" Sophie shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. Vincent stared at her. The anger in his eyes softened into piercing intensity. He looked at her lips, then back to her eyes. "I want the truth," he whispered. "I want to understand why, even though you could destroy my empire, I can't stop thinking about how you looked when you challenged me in that restaurant." The air seemed to vanish from the room. The tension shifted from dangerous to undeniably sensual. Vincent's gaze dropped to her lips. He leaned in. They were centimeters apart. Sophie didn't pull away. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from a sudden, overwhelming magnetic pull. "Boss!" The intercom on the wall buzzed loudly, shattering the moment. Vincent closed his eyes and let out a frustrated growl. He stepped back, straightened his shirt, walked to the wall, and pressed the button. "What?" "Security breach in the lobby," Rocco's voice crackled. "A truck just rammed the entrance gates. Armed men. They are masked." Vincent looked at Sophie. "The Vanzettis. They are here." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a pistol, an elegant black Beretta. He checked the chamber and turned to her. "Do you know how to handle one of these?" he asked. "Yes," Sophie said. Her father had taught her. Vincent handed her the gun. "Good. Stay here. Lock the door. If anyone comes through that door and it's not me, shoot." "Where are you going?" "To kill them," Vincent said calmly. "Welcome to our first date, Sophie." He walked out, leaving her alone with a loaded pistol and the sounds of gunfire erupting 3 floors below. The silence in the penthouse was worse than the shooting. The gunfire downstairs stopped, replaced by a suffocating quiet that pressed on her eardrums. Sophie stood in the middle of the kitchen. The heavy Beretta trembled in her two-handed grip, aimed at the service entrance. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "This gun is not a threat, Sophie. It's a decision. Never draw it unless you've already decided to kill." She had decided. If Vanzetti men came through that door, she would not hesitate. A heavy thud against the door made her jump. Then the electronic lock beeped. They were hacking it. Sophie took a deep breath, steadied her aim, and waited. The door hissed open. A figure burst in, dressed in black tactical gear. Sophie's finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't shoot!" A hoarse, breathless voice yelled. Vincent collapsed against the doorframe. His white shirt was soaked red at the left shoulder. He wasn't holding a gun. He was clutching the wound. "Vincent!" Sophie flicked the safety on and rushed to him, grabbing his good arm to support him. "You're hurt." "A scratch," he gasped, kicking the door shut and locking it. "But we have a bigger problem. They took the lobby. They took the elevators and stairs. We are trapped." "Vanzetti mercenaries," Vincent spat, limping to the kitchen island. "Who betrayed me, Sophie?" "Someone gave them the access codes to my security system. Only 3 people know those codes." He grabbed a bottle of vodka from the counter, unscrewed the cap with his teeth, and poured it over his shoulder. He hissed in pain. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the marble countertop. "We can't stay here," Sophie said. Survival instinct kicked in at full power. She snatched a clean kitchen towel and pressed it to his wound. "If they have the codes, they'll be here in minutes." "There's an exit," Vincent said, looking at her. His eyes were feverish but focused. "But you won't like it. The garbage chute." Sophie stared at him. "You're joking. You wear $3,000 suits and you want to jump down the garbage chute? It leads to the compactor in the basement. The compactor is programmed for a cycle at 4 a.m. It's 3:15 now. We have 45 minutes to get down, get out, and reach the subway tunnels before we get crushed." A loud explosion shook the floor. They were breaching the main penthouse doors. "Then the garbage chute," Sophie said. They ran to the utility room. The chute was narrow and smelled of stale coffee and rot. Vincent went first, sliding into the darkness without a word. Sophie followed. The terrifying drop plunged her into a nightmare of claustrophobia. They landed on a pile of trash bags in a steel container. The smell was disgusting, but they were alive. Vincent groaned, rolling over the edge. His suit was ruined. His face was smeared with dirt. He helped Sophie out. His grip was strong despite the injury. "The subway exit is through the technical tunnels," he whispered. "Run." They made their way through the labyrinth of New York's underworld. Rats scattered from their footsteps. 20 minutes later, they emerged through a grate into an alley in Hell's Kitchen. The rain was still falling, washing the garbage smell from their clothes but soaking them to the bone. "My car is tracked," Vincent said, leaning against a brick wall and breathing hard. "My accounts will be watched. We are ghosts, Sophie. We have nothing." "We have cash," Sophie said. She reached under her shirt and pulled out a wad of damp $20 bills, waitress tips. "I never put them in the bank." Vincent looked at the money, then at her. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. The supposed king of New York financed by a waitress's tip jar. "Shut up and walk," she said, grabbing his hand. They hailed a yellow cab. No apps. No tracking. Sophie gave the driver an address in Queens, not her apartment, but a safe house her father had prepared 10 years earlier. "He told me never to use it unless it was the end of the world. Tonight it feels like the end of the world has come." The apartment was a small, dusty studio above a laundromat. It had a pull-out couch, a first aid kit, and a rotary phone. Sophie sat Vincent on the couch. "Take off your shirt." "First invite me to dinner," he muttered, closing his eyes. He was losing blood. "Vincent, don't pass out," she ordered. She peeled off his blood-soaked shirt. The bullet had gouged a furrow through the deltoid muscle, painful and bloody, but not fatal. She found the first aid kit, poured alcohol on the wound, and began stitching with needle and thread from a sewing box. Vincent didn't scream. He just looked at her face. "You have good hands," he whispered. "Steady." "I once sewed my own dress for prom," Sophie said. Her voice trembled slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "And Dad taught me to stitch wounds when I fell off my bike. Your father taught you a lot." He knew this day would come. She tied off the suture and bandaged it. She rocked back on her heels, exhausted. Her white robe was ruined, covered in soot and his blood. Vincent reached out with his good hand and touched her cheek. His thumb traced her lower lip. "I'm sorry," he said. Sophie looked at him. "For what?" "For being a mafia boss. For dragging you back into this life. You had gotten out. You were safe on the margins." "I was never safe," Sophie confessed, pressing her cheek into his palm. "I was just waiting." "That wears you down. Every day looking over your shoulder, wondering if the person walking behind you is the one who will kill you." "You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore," Vincent said fiercely. "I'll look for you. I'll burn this city to the ground before I let anyone touch you." "You lost your city tonight," she reminded him softly. "I can take it back." He sat up, wincing, bringing his face close to hers. "But today I don't care about the city. What matters is that for the first time in 10 years I'm not alone in the dark." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle movie kiss. It was desperate, tasting of vodka, rain, and blood. It was the kiss of two people standing on the edge of a cliff who decided to jump together. Sophie's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment they weren't waitress and boss. They were simply two survivors clinging to the only solid thing in a spinning world. When they finally broke apart, gasping, Vincent pressed his forehead to hers. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we kill them all." "Tomorrow," Sophie agreed. She curled up beside him on the narrow couch. His arm lay like a shield across her chest. For the first time in 10 years, Sophia DeMarco fell asleep without checking the door lock. Morning light filtered through the dirty windows of the apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Sophie woke up alone on the couch. Panic stabbed her chest for a second until she smelled coffee, awful cheap instant coffee. Vincent stood by the window, peering through the blinds. He wore a t-shirt he had apparently found in an old drawer. It was a faded tourist shirt that said "New York," 2 sizes too small and stretched tight across his muscular chest. In any other circumstances it would have been funny. Today it was painfully real. "You're awake," he said without turning. "We have problems, Sophie." Sophie sat up, rubbing her face. "Only one. I used the landline. I called the only person I thought I could trust, my brother Dominic. He didn't answer. He turned. His face was grim. Rocco answered. He said Dominic is dead. They found him in the lobby with his throat cut." Sophie gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Oh God, Vincent, that's not the worst part," Vincent said. His voice turned to cold steel. "Rocco said the security cameras showed who let the Vanzetti strike team in. It wasn't a hacker. Someone physically opened the service doors from the inside. Paul," Sophie remembered. "The lieutenant from the warehouse, the one who had mistranslated the graffiti. Paul was with me since childhood," Vincent said, crushing the paper cup in his hand. "He was my right hand and he sold me out." "Why?" "Money. Power. Fear," Sophie suggested. "The Vanzettis have a certain reputation." "It doesn't matter," Vincent said. "He killed my brother. He burned my home. And they're hunting us. What do we do? We can't go back to Manhattan. They'll be waiting." "We are not going back to Manhattan," Vincent said. "We are drawing them out. I know where Paul will be today. He's greedy. He'll try to seize the assets. He'll be at the Red Hook container terminal. That's where we store the goods. You want to walk into a trap?" "No." Vincent walked to the table where the pistol lay. He checked the magazine. "I want to set a trap. But I need you to do something dangerous." Sophie stood. "Yes." She tightened the belt of her ruined robe, feeling cold resolve settle in her stomach. "Tell me." The Red Hook container terminal was a labyrinth of rusty steel canyons. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp. It smelled thickly of salt water and diesel fuel. Sophie walked down the center of the main aisle with her hands raised. She wore an oversized New York t-shirt and jeans found in the safe house. She looked small and defenseless. Enough. "Where is he?" Paul's voice echoed. He stepped out from behind a blue shipping container. He had 6 men with him. They weren't Romano soldiers. They were outsiders, Vanzetti mercenaries. "Where is he?" Paul shouted, pointing the gun at her chest. He looked manic. His whole body twitched. His eyes darted everywhere. "He's wounded," Sophie shouted back. Her voice echoed off the metal walls. "He's at a motel on 4th Avenue. He sent me to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Paul laughed. "Vincent Romano doesn't negotiate. He executes. He's dying." "Paul," Sophie lied, putting every ounce of pain she could into her voice. "He's bleeding out. He just wants to know why." "Why did you do it?" Paul's face twisted. "Why?" "Because he went soft. He let a waitress talk back to him. For years he let the Vanzettis invade our territory for peace. There is no peace, Sophie. There is only power. And Salvatore Vanzetti offered me the crown." "Salvatore isn't here, is he?" Sophie asked, looking around. "He's on his way to finish it personally," Paul sneered. "But first I'll make sure you don't talk. You know too much about the old dialects." He raised the pistol. "Now!" Sophie screamed, throwing herself to the ground. From the roof of the blue container a shadow launched. Vincent didn't jump. He descended like fire. He had a sniper rifle from the safehouse cache. The first shot dropped the man to Paul's right. The second dropped the one on the left. Chaos erupted. The mercenaries dove for cover, firing blindly at the upper stacks. Sophie rolled under the chassis of a trailer, crawling through the mud. The Beretta was tucked in her belt, and she wasn't just bait, she was the flanking strike. Vincent drew their fire, moving from container to container like a vengeful ghost above them. Paul didn't look up. He was looking for Sophie. She saw his boots splashing through puddles beside her hiding spot. "Come out, little princess." Paul yelled. "Come out and die like your father." Sophie froze. "Like my father." She crawled out the other side of the trailer and stood. "My father died of a heart attack in Ohio," she said in a steady voice. Paul spun, aiming the gun at her. He hesitated. He was smiling. "That's what they told you." Paul laughed. "Old Marco DeMarco never made it to Ohio. We caught him in Jersey 10 years ago. Who do you think told us where you were? He was waiting for you to end the pain, Sophie. Your daddy sold you to buy himself a quick death." The world turned upside down. The lie she had lived for 10 years, that her father was safe, that she was protecting him, shattered. White-hot, blinding rage surged through her veins. "Liar!" Sophie screamed. Paul pulled the trigger. At that exact instant a black shadow dropped from the sky. Vincent crashed into Paul, knocking the gun from his hand. The bullet ricocheted off a metal container inches from Sophie's head. Vincent and Paul fell into the mud. It was a brutal, ugly fight. No martial arts, just fists and fury. Paul was younger, but Vincent fought with the fury of a man who had lost his brother. Vincent took a blow to his wounded shoulder and roared in pain, staggering. Paul seized the moment, pulled a knife from his boot, and lunged forward. Sophie didn't think. She raised the Beretta. She didn't tremble. She didn't hesitate. Bang! Paul froze. The knife fell from his hand. He looked down at the red flower blooming on his chest. He looked at Sophie. His eyes were wide with shock. "Waitress," he gasped. He fell backward into the mud, dead. Vincent lay on the ground, breathing hard, clutching his shoulder. He looked at Paul's body, then at Sophie. "Are you okay?" He gasped. Sophie lowered the pistol. She felt cold and empty. He said, "My father sold me." Vincent rose to his feet, swaying slightly. He walked to her, ignoring the pain. He took the gun from her hand and pulled her against his chest. "He was lying to hurt you," Vincent said firmly. "Men like Paul lie until the end." "And if..." Vincent spun her around and pushed her behind him. Slow clapping echoed through the container terminal. From the main gate a black limousine rolled in. The window lowered. There sat an old man with a face like a dried apple, surrounded by 10 men with automatic rifles. Salvatore Vanzetti. "Bravo," the old man croaked. A Shakespearean tragedy. Brother against brother and the girl in the middle. Vincent stood tall, shielding Sophie with his body. "It's over, Salvatore. Paul is dead. You no longer have your man inside." "I don't need my man inside," Salvatore smiled, flashing gold teeth. "I have numerical superiority. 10 men against 2, and one of you is wounded." Salvatore opened the car door and stepped out, leaning on a cane. Give me the girl, Salvatore said. Give me the daughter of the rat DeMarco and I'll let you live, Vincent. I'll even let you keep your territory. Just give me the blood that is owed to me. Vincent looked at the armed men. He looked at the impossible odds. Then he looked at Sophie. He grabbed her hand. Trust me, he whispered. Yes, she said, even though she knew they were about to die. Vincent looked back at Salvatore. He smiled, a wolfish, terrifying smile. You want her? Vincent shouted. Come and take her. He raised his hand and pressed a small detonator he had taken from Paul's pocket. Click. The container next to Salvatore didn't explode. Instead, its doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. From the darkness inside came a low growl. It wasn't an engine. Vincent hadn't come to the terminal just to hide. He had come to the arsenal. Down, Vincent said. He yanked Sophie behind a concrete barrier just as the heavy machine gun turret installed inside the container came to life. It was a trap Vincent had prepared years ago for a day like this, a remotely controlled sentry. The terminal filled with a deafening roar. The automatic thunder of the turret shredded the silence, ripping luxury sedans apart and forcing Salvatore's men to throw themselves into the mud. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Vincent held Sophie tightly against the concrete barrier, covering her ears while the air filled with smoke and the acrid smell of cordite. When the mechanical whine finally stopped, silence returned, heavier than before. Vincent rose first, pistol raised, surveying the destruction. Salvatore Vanzetti lay slumped against the wreckage of his limousine. His cane was broken. His reign had ended by the very modernization he had refused to understand. The threat that had hunted Sophie's family for a decade was gone, buried under a hail of bullets in the dirty Red Hook container terminal. In the distance, sirens wailed. The NYPD finally dared to appear now that the war was over. We need to go, Vincent said hoarsely. He held out his hand. Sophie looked at it. It was the hand of a killer, but also the hand that had stitched her wounds and shielded her from fire. She didn't hesitate. She took it. 6 months later, the reopening of La Masca became the social event of the season. The restaurant had been renovated. The pretentious, stuffy atmosphere had been replaced by something darker, more elegant, and infinitely more dangerous. Sophie moved through the crowded dining room not in a waitress uniform but in a stunning emerald dress that hugged every curve. She wasn't carrying a tray, she was carrying power. She greeted the city's elite, judges, senators, and industrial magnates, with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Now everyone knew who she was. She wasn't Sophie from Hoboken. She was Sophia DeMarco, the woman who had walked through fire with the King of New York. She approached the private table in the back of the room, table number 4. Vincent was waiting. He looked better than ever. His shoulder fully healed. The suit sharp as a razor. But his eyes softened the moment he saw her. He poured wine into 2 glasses. Revenue is up 40%, Sophie said, sitting down. And the kitchen staff is terrified of me. Good, Vincent said, sliding the glass toward her. Fear keeps the soup from getting cold. He leaned forward, taking her hand across the table, ignoring the onlookers. My queen, he whispered in a low, intimate voice, and this time ours. Now the world belongs to us. Sophie smiled, raising her glass. She didn't whisper, she spoke clearly, letting the neighboring tables hear, letting the city know exactly where she stood. Yes, Don Vincenzo. Remember who runs the kitchen. Vincent threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, happy laugh those flamenco walls had never heard before. The mafia boss spoke in Italian and, once again, the last word belonged to the waitress. And this story is not just about the captivating world of the mafia or the danger of shootouts. It is about the power of a voice. Sophie began as an invisible character, a waitress who dissolved into the background, hiding her true identity and her past to survive. But when she chose to speak, to break the silence in that restaurant, she didn't just translate a phrase, she reclaimed her own life. Vincent and Sophie represent 2 halves of a broken world that found support in each other. Vincent found someone who was not afraid of his power, and Sophie found someone who could protect her without forcing her to stay silent. In the end, they didn't just survive the war, they rewrote the rules of the game. It reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not a gun. It is the truth spoken at the right moment to the right person.